Morning, folks. This morning we move on in our daily devotionals to the next commandment, the ninth commandment. It reads as follows in the book of Exodus, chapter 20. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbour. The original setting of this was the judicial process in Israel. God wanted the judicial process in Israel to be just. In the nations around about Israel, someone could bring an accusation against someone else, often false accusations, and those false accusations could lead to conviction and indeed to the penalty for the particular thing that they were accused of. In other words, the nations round about didn't have a just judicial system, and God intended that Israel would have such. That being the case, no one was allowed to bring a false accusation against a fellow Israelite. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbour. And indeed, the law goes on later to say that things had to be proved by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. But whilst this was the original context and setting for the giving of this particular commandment, it was in no way confined to that. It applies to all kinds of untruth speaking. In other words, it applies to any kind of false testimony or lie. God is a God of truth, and as such, he expects his people to be people of truth. Therefore, any kind of spoken falsehood is contrary to God's mind and will, because it is contrary to God's character. Lying is something that is sinful. And yet, lying is something that is endemic within our society. The number of lies that people tell, should I say the number of lies that we tell, is unbelievable. I'm sure you have heard the humorous story of how does one know when a politician is telling lies? And the answer is quite simple. His or her lips are moving. We can't trust our politicians because they speak lies so often. Why is this? Well, one of the main reasons is because we are fallen human beings. We are sinful to the core. And one of the most common ways in which that sin reveals itself is in us speaking lies. In Psalm 58, the psalmist describes the way in which sinful nature reveals itself in the everyday life of a sinner. He says this: even from birth the wicked go astray, from the womb they are wayward and speak lies. And of course we see this in children. You have 2 children and they're in the kitchen and mummy comes in and one of the children has sponge and cream all over her face because she's been eating the cake that mum had baked, and mum says to her, "Did you eat that cake?" And the child immediately points to her sister and says, "No, she did." We just know that that's the way children behave. They tell lies, and so do we. In Psalm 116, the psalmist declares a truth which is true of all of us. All men are liars. Why do we lie? Because we are sinful. The prophet Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 9 and verses 4 and following, says the following: beware of your friends, do not trust your brothers, for every brother is a deceiver and every friend a slanderer. Friend deceives friend, and no one speaks the truth. They have taught their tongues to lie. They weary themselves with sinning. And there's no doubt about it that as Christians, this is probably one of the sins that you and I most commonly commit. And we commit it because we are sinful. It's in human nature to sin. And brethren, whilst that is true, it is also true that by God's grace, those of us who have been saved have now the ability not to sin. We have the ability to stop ourselves from speaking lies. We have the Holy Ghost who dwells within us. He is sanctifying us. He, being God himself, is truth, and he wants us to speak the truth. The Apostle Paul encourages God's people, speak the truth in love one to another. So as you go out into the day today, think to yourself, each time you're tempted to tell a lie for whatever reason, and we'll maybe look at some of those reasons tomorrow, whatever the reason you might be tempted to tell a lie, stop, think to yourself, this is wrong, this is sinful, and instead of telling a lie, tell the truth. Yes, it may be embarrassing, yes, it may be difficult, but brethren, this is what we are called to do. You shall not bear false witness, or more colloquially, do not tell lies. And may God help all of us, by his grace, to be men and women of truth. We'll return to this subject, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.